Hey, did I ever tell you about this friend of mine? This happened to a very famous guy. Yeah, he's a real famous movie actor, star type. Anyway, he had this old family house. He's originally from New England. He doesn't say much about that. He likes to pretend that he's actually from Cinema Land. But he actually is from a small, very tacky town in upper Vermont that went out of business about 45 years ago. It's one of these towns made out of gray shacks with old 52 Fords rusting away behind the house in the weeds. You've seen those places, One Shell station that's had a sign out in front of it, since 1932 says out of gas, no money. And this is the kind of town he's from. and he doesn't say much about it, but it's the truth. He's from this town. And for those of you who are cuckoos about bears, who really love bears and the outdoors, this is another side of bears and the outdoors, which is not brought to you by Walt Disney. If you watch Disney very faithfully, you will realize that things like man-eating tigers are really just kittens. Think of the fantastic breakthrough. The Cincinnati Bengals announced that they have signed a secret #1 draft choice, which only they have drafted. Nobody else knew about them. They signed them for backfield uses for next year. And the opening kickoff is kicked. The specialty team runs down the field. The Bengals, the opening play of the season, and they are stopped at the 24-yard line. A couple of passes later, they're down on the 6-yard line. Now, this is when the going gets rough, right, Jerry? That last 5 or 6 yards on that football field is like trying to move the Empire State Building maybe a foot and a half to the right. And it's tough, man. It's tough. That's why so many field goals are kicked, because it is in this part of the field when the defensive line goes back and says, okay, off with the gloves. We have messed up. We've given the customers a lot of fun between and now is the time to do it. Say, gets mean. Well, at that point, Cincinnati Bengals call 42Y yellow, which is their play, and down the runway, out of the dressing room comes their #1 draft choice, a 2,422-pound male rhinoceros who has been trained over the season to hold the ball in his mouth and to charge forward upon the cry of 32 white yellow. It would really put an extra little kick in the game, wouldn't it? Especially if he charges right through, knocks down the goalpost, tramples 3 all-star tackles, goes right over the wall, and goes right through the stadium and winds up in the parking lot on a rampage. Now, that would give Howard Cosell a hell of a lot to talk about. And he would say, of course, and there is my good friend, old double-horned McDougal. You notice Howard Cosell has nothing but good friends. Good friends. And yet, I have been in this business for years, and I have never once met a person who would concede to be a friend of Howard Cosell. You want to hear stuff that happens really in TV stations? You don't hear about this stuff, It's funny, a TV guide is always giving you the inside story of, you just fill in the blanks. What is Mary Tyler Moore really like? Well, I don't know. The true story of television, radio, showbiz rarely comes out. The other day, I go up to this intellectual public service type station, where they're always doing a comprehensive survey of Etruscan art, kind of thing. A 3-part survey of the Punic Wars, narrated by Laurence Olivier. It's great stuff. It's stuff you can hardly wait to see. And here they've got all this stuff on the air. It's going on. You think all those people over there are intellectual. Let me tell you what happened. I walked up there, and all this intellectual stuff is going on the air, actually on the air, all kinds of English professors saying, and the theories, of course, behind this particular solar system, and they're going on with pointers. Why is the guys at the television, the actual guys at the TV station, they've got a chain where they're playing a tape, and they're looking at it on a color monitor. It's the most unbelievable, indescribable porn you ever saw in your life. Sitting there. On the one hand, you see the intellectual channel, and on the other hand, you see the channel. And I'll just tell you the truth. So, nevertheless, that's what I'm saying. Behind the scenes in showbiz is rarely actually ever told to you. Well, this buddy of mine, who is a great romantic hero in the films these days, I've known him for a long time. Comes from this little tacky town up in New England. With the gray houses, the 53 Fords and the weeds in the back, the crummy little general store where all they got is snuff for sale, a few cans of Campbell's pork and beans, that kind of stuff. Bad saying, and it's winter all the time. This town it's like Lower Slavovia. You recall the country, that Lower Slavovia with the schmooze? Do you remember that? And sure, it's Al Cap. And this is the way this town is. It's always winter. It's always either raining or snowing, or somebody's always come down with a gigantic case of the flu and they had to fly him to Boston. It's that kind of scene. Well, the old family house is still there in this town where he grew up in. And there are a few ancient, decrepit relatives still living in this old house. It's a house right out of a Shirley Jackson novel. You've ever read Shirley Jackson novels? You haven't? Well, yeah, I'm sorry. When you're illiterate, there's very few things that a human being can talk to you about. But it's right out of a Shirley Jackson. Let's put it on this basis. It makes the Charles Adams house. You've seen that house? Okay. It makes the Charles Adams house look like a Miami Beach condominium, right? This is an ancient, old, decrepit house. Well, he went up here a couple of years ago, just before he was going to get married, and he took his elegant girl that he was marrying, who was another famous actress in this case. They went up there, and they were looking at the old homestead. And his old decrepit uncle greeted him, and they went all over the house, looking at the old stuff. They had the old furniture and all that. Everything was there from the 19th century. And he says, you must have some interesting stuff up in the closet, up in the attic upstairs, It's fantastic stuff. I remember as a kid going up there, and I'd like to go up there and just see some of that old stuff. And so they go up in the attic. Well, here is this enormous collection of impedimenta, real junk from thousands of years ago. All the stuff, old New England families never throw anything away. I mean, a typical New England family of the 19th century, if they lit a match, they would save the rest of the match. You never might know, when you might need an extra little bit of firewood. You might need a stick. So up in the attic is all this stuff, millions of things, all kinds of stuff, old Coke bottles and everything they save from. You never know. So he's got it all up there, and he's poking around. Dust is everywhere. He's poking around, and he sees something he remembered from ancient days when he was a little kid. He says, "What is that over there?" And the old uncle says, "Well, I'll tell you what that is. That's a bear skin." He says, "A bear skin?" "Oh, of course. Yes, your grandfather, Ebenezer, shot that bear outside of Portland, Maine." So he looks at the bear. Here's a bear skin all rolled up with a head. The head with a big growling-looking face with the teeth and all that stuff. He says, "That's wonderful, Uncle Elmer. I wonder if I could have that. That would just be beautiful in our new apartment in New York." And so Uncle Elmer says, "Of course, I think your grandfather, Ebenezer, would be proud to have you have that bear." And so at that point, he takes the bear, and they pile it into his Ferrari, and they put it in the back, and they drive to New York, and he has a bear skin. So he takes it to this place where they cleaned it for him, and it's beautiful. It's a gigantic bear skin, the kind that lays on the hearth there next to the crackling fireplace, and it has enormous eyes, big glass eyes, huge white teeth. It's a kind of bear. See, there it is. It's beautiful. So he has this all clean. It's just great looking. It's a great big black bear, and it looked fantastic in his apartment. So the next week, after he got the bear back, now this is the important part of the story. The next week, he is about to be married now, and he's got this beautiful apartment over there in Sutton Place, and he's very proud of it. He's got this fantastic bear skin, which was shot by his grandfather, Ebenezer, outside of dismal Seepage, New Hampshire. So he gets the bear all cleaned up. Everything is beautiful. He has an elegant wedding, very formal. I mean, this is the kind of a crowd that came to this wedding that didn't even have to rent their tuxedos. They had tuxedos, and wear them 3-4 times a week. And so he's at this beautiful wedding ceremony, and they finally get married. Now, in fact, the rice they threw out. This crowd was so was so rich that they didn't throw, Uncle Ben's, minute rice. They threw actual wild rice from Minnesota. You know what this stuff goes upon. A very elegant wedding. So he takes his bride up to his apartment, and they were going to spend the first night here in New York, and then they were going to go to places like Corsica and so on. So they very, very romantic night. Champagne, and they're on the bearskin there. They're looking at the fire, and it's just beautiful evening. They're there with the crackling fire and the warming. They had toddies of one kind or another, and just beautiful evening. Woodcuts on the wall, the whole thing. I mean, actual woodcuts done by, say, an early Greek woodcutter of the 3rd century B.C. This is the kind of stuff he had, that very, very elegant. Well, they spent an extremely romantic night. And the next day, they took the plane, chartered plane, if you're curious. Yes, this is the kind of people that work. The movie company he worked for chartered a plane, and he flew to Corsica with his bride. Now, that's coming a long way for a kid that came from a second-rate deserted town in New England. He's really up there high up on a hog. Well, about the 3rd day in Corsica, they were going to Corfu and places like that. About the 3rd or 4th day, he began to notice something funny is beginning to happen to him. He can't quite figure out what it is. He goes to one of the elegant casinos in Monte Carlo, for example. And he had this hand-fitted tuxedo that had been fitted by small Italian elves. Fitted, it's just beautiful. It just looked like it was poured on him. See, he goes to the casino and he's standing there trying to look like a David Niven at the at the baccarat table, and he keeps feeling this funny thing between his shoulder blades. It was like something was running up and down his shoulder blades. What the hell's going on here? See, so he didn't say anything about it. A little embarrassing. He figured he developed a rash from too many helpings of crepe Suzette, something like that. Possibly got a little bad Napoleon brandy. Who knew? So that night, he goes to the elegant hotel, takes about 4 showers, figures wash it off, whatever it is, and they continue their revelry. Well, the next night, it's even worse. He's itching all over the place now. See, his kneecaps are beginning to itch. And that's kind of embarrassing when you're a major movie star and you're being interviewed by elegant interviewers from things like Cinema Verite. And you're standing there scratching, and excuse me, and you itch under your arms. So he began to get a little concerned over this, and he didn't say anything about it. His bride, of course, was beautiful, elegant lady. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. This lady looks like she looks like a Packard hubcap. She's got that clean, chiseled, chromium, classical beauty. The kind of lady, the kind of you see once in a while peering at you from the pages of Harper's Bazaar. Once in a while when somebody's riffling the New York Times fashion supplement, you once in a while see these elfin eyes peering out from you. The kind of lady that's always stepping out of a private helicopter. You've seen those ads, right? Well, she's that type, see. She even had the kind of name that had Melanie. That's a name for you. I'll give her a nom de plume here. Her name was Melanie. Her name is even more très elegant than that, but Melanie Smithers or something like that. So here's Melanie, about the 4th or 5th day into their elegant honeymoon. Melanie is sitting there eating a peach melba, and he's working his way through a baked Alaska, and the waiters are salaaming all over the place in this little elegant restaurant in the Spanish Highlands. When suddenly she said, Gaunt. Incidentally, we'll give him a name. His film name is Gaunt Rockwell. She says, Gaunt. And he says, yes, Melanie. She says, Gaunt, I'm just going to have to tell you. She says, I'm having terrible skin problems. He says, skin problems? What kind, dear? She says, I don't know. There's something between my shoulder blades. And he says, by George, that's strange. He didn't want to admit. He says, by George, that's strange. Do you mind tonight in our little boudoir have a look? She says, no. But it's just very embarrassing. She said the other day when we were being interviewed by the London Observer, I was having so much difficulty just sitting still. And he says, well, that's strange. Perhaps it's the water. We'll order Vichy in the room tonight. Well, to make a long story short, they had to cut their honeymoon 1 week short because of an intense, unbelievable itch that began to develop in both of them, and in fact, it pursued them all the way through the more elegant spas of Central and Southern Europe. And finally, they went to 3 doctors, nothing. They couldn't find a thing. So finally, he comes back to New York, and I saw him 2 days later. And I said, "How's it going?" He said, "Oh my God, I can't tell you, I'm dying. I said, "What's the matter, going? You're the toast of the Western world, for God's sakes. You are the sex symbol of the world. What do you mean you're dying? You have married Melanie Smithers. Melanie Smithers, who has at least 14 or 15 more teeth than any human being." He said, "I don't care. I can't. Oh my God, I'm having fantastic trouble." I said, "What's the matter, going?" "Oh!" Well, that night, he finally decided he was going to go to the most elegant dermatologist in all of New York, which he did. He goes to this elegant dermatologist who examined him minutely with microscopes and with various types of slides, one thing and another, in the next room, being elegantly examined by a very elegant lady dermatologist. Of course, you realize that. It's a whole different ballgame for movie stars. This elegant lady dermatologist is going over Melanie with a fine-tooth comb, if I may use a somewhat crude expression, trying to figure out what the hell is biting her shoulder blades. Well, you want to hear? I better not tell you. So they call in several other dermatologists for consultation because they couldn't find anything really. And then one dermatologist, an old gentleman who walked around with a crooked stick in his hand, that kind, and he has a big brass hearing aid with a horn on the end. The kind of says, hey, what was that? That kind of old dermatologist. Yes, he was a dermatologist who must have examined the cold sores on Attil of the Hun. He was that old. He took one look at him and says, I know what that is. And at that point, my friend Gaunt says, "Excuse me, doctor, but what is it?" He says, "A bear weevils." He says, "What?" Well, I'll tell you exactly what happened. My friend, the elegant movie star, and his elegant movie actress wife were the first people, quite probably since the late 1820s, who came down with a virulent case of bear weevils. And you know what this is? Now listen carefully what it is, friends. Bears have a very exclusive kind of extremely tiny, almost microscopic weevils. They're little tiny bugs. Actually, what they are, let's put it this way, they're vest pocket fleas. They're smaller than fleas. You know how little a flea is? Well, if you can imagine a flea having a pet that comes and sits on its knee, that feeds at its feet and barks. Well, this is a bear weevil. They're little tiny things. They're so small. They're smaller than the point of a pin. But, oh, man, are they persistent. I mean, their bite far exceeds their size. I mean, micro-ounce for micro-ounce, the bear weevil is the itchiest creature in the Western world and the most difficult to cure. Well, at that point, the old man says, you had bear weevils. And all the other dermatologists were aghast. They said, "What do you mean, bear weevils? This is ridiculous, doctor. After all, this is Gaunt Rockwell, and he lives on Sutton Place. Bear weevils. Where would he get bear weevils?" The old man says, "I don't care. Those are bear weevils. My God, when I was growing up in the 1820s, I remember bear weevils well. I remember Daniel Boone coming in." He starts talking about bear weevil cases that he knew as a youth. You must understand that old doctors have seen a lot of great things that young doctors at Mount Sinai have only heard of. Oh yeah, an old doctor, when a good roaring case of diphtheria arrives, he recognizes it instantly. His cousin Arlene had it. I'm telling you, many doctors have never seen this kind of stuff. See, but this old doctor instantly recognized out of his youth a case of virulent bear weevils. So at that point, the first dermatologist got my friend Gaunt. They didn't. This was all, by the way, done in consultation. My friend didn't know anything about this. They got him into one of the consulting rooms, and this elegant dermatologist who went for maybe $200-300 a minute. He says, "Mr. Rockwell," he said, "we have a curious thing here. One of the consulting physicians is of the opinion that you, this is ridiculous, of course, is of the opinion that you have a case of what he refers to as, well, it embarrasses me to say this, but bear weevils. Hi, George, isn't that strange? Well, you know, you get these old coots, and at that point, my friend's gone, says, oh, my God, yes, bear weevils! And at that point, the elegant dermatologist says, bear weevils? Have you been consorting with bears lately? I mean, you know, you can only get bear weevils from very intimate contact with bears. You do not get this from just going out to the Bronx Zoo, you know. It's intimate contact, because the bear weevil is a very rare creature. And Gaunt said, yes, I have had intimate contact with a bear. Of course, immediately this caused an electric atmosphere to just charge the office. He says, I didn't know what I was saying. He said, I was so by that time, so going up the wall with this itch so much that I didn't know what I was saying. Yes, I have had intimate contact with a bear. At that point, the doctor says, indeed. Miss Murgatroyd, would you please turn off your intercom? I'd like to talk to Mr. Rockwell about very interesting but very intimate matter. Now, you were saying you've had intimate contact with a bear. Now, of course, you realize this is in strictest confidence. How are they? At that point, my friend says, what do you mean, how are they what? He says, well, bears. I've always been curious. I've read of these cases in abnormal psychology. Of course, I'm not a psychologist. You must understand, Mr. Rockwell. And I don't put a man down for what he digs. I certainly don't. I'm a man of our times, and I believe in free sexual expression. But I'm just curious. You don't mind if I ask you a few professional questions? He said, what are you suggesting? Well, I'm not suggesting anything, Mr. Rockwell. Believe me, I'm not going to be the person to suggest anything with you. I merely would like to know. You mentioned that you've had some rather intimate contact with a bear, and after all, bear weevils are not a thing one sees often here in my Park Avenue office. And I'm just curious, for the record, I may write a piece on it. Naturally, I wouldn't use your name for the AMA Journal, one of the rare cases of bear weevils that break out. And I'm just curious, by the way, man to man. Let's talk about it, just man to man. I've always been rather, well, how can I say it? It's kind of an interesting thought. Suddenly hit Gaunt that he was getting a reputation he hadn't bargained for. And more than that, he could suddenly see his case being discussed in the National Enquirer. You know, big headlines. Shows his picture there, a smudgy picture. Next to him was a gigantic Kodiak bear. It says, are the rumors true about Gaunt Rockwell? Doctor inside spills all. He says, now wait a minute, let's get it straight here, doctor, before we go any further. Let's get it straight. I want to get this straight. I want to get this straight. Hold it there, man. That knob is supposed to be turned down. That's it. There you go. He says, let's get this straight, doctor. Now, it may be Christmas out. I mean, I can hear nothing but Christmas music being played and sung all over the streets. But I'm going to tell you one thing, doctor. One more suggestion like that. And may I use an expression of the streets, doctor, that I learned as a boy? Oh, of course, Mr. Rockwell. Feel free to discuss anything here in this office. He said, I'm going to kick your butt right up around your ears. Now, I don't know what the technical description or the medical description of your butt is, and I don't know much Latin, but that's what I'm going to do if you suggest that I've been having a little hanky-panky with bears. And outside, the Christmas music continued. It was the time of goodwill, peace, and Christmas joy to one and all. My friend says, it was like some fantastic nightmare. I was still itching, and it had moved down from my shoulder blades, and the backs of my knees were itching now. I had been infested by these damn bear weevils. And this guy was suggesting that it came from hanky-panky with bears. And so we talked it over for about 20 minutes. Says, I finally convinced him that after all, it was just from this bear rug. The doctor says, well, of course, you realize that it's very difficult to believe that a bear rug that was shot in 1827 would continue to have bear weevils for all those years. I don't know what the lifespan of the bear weevil is. Gone. But it's quite unusual, quite unique. He says, and I went out with a can of kerosene. Did you know that the only known cure for bear weevils is kerosene? And so for the next 2 weeks, the two most famous movie stars in America made pictures, went around to the interviews, saw people, amid all the great glorious cheer of the life of the star. As Christmas moved to a climax, covered with kerosene. Both of them together, that's it.
Gene Shepherd is heard Wednesday nights on WETA Radio beginning at 6:30.